Yeah, my name is Nicholas Bates, and I do want to go ahead and talk to you all about owning your data. The other thing that I call it is the practicality of hosting your own servers. A lot of times people go ahead and they'll see people on like YouTube or something like that. They see them with these rack of servers, like, oh, that'd be really awesome to have that. It's got to cost like tens of thousands of dollars. Well, it's actually a little bit less than you think. So I'm going to go ahead and go over that. But give you a little bit of information about myself. I am a technology professional. Currently work for a $2 trillion financial institution. And the other thing is, I am a longtime nerd. I'm 33 years old. And when I was 16, I was able to save up enough money on my paper route to go ahead and buy myself my first desktop. I had Windows XP on it for all of maybe 2 operational hours, if that, and then I installed the most difficult Linux distribution at the time, Gentoo, on it. And I've been going ahead and I've been playing around with this stuff ever since. But let's go ahead and just dive right into this because, like I said, one of the things that a lot of people see is when they think about owning their own servers, they think you spend thousands of dollars. But and you know, the other thing that you start thinking is like, what is the benefits? When this project was proposed to me by my partner in crime, Wesley Irvin, he works for Mohegan Sun out in Connecticut as a telecom administrator. When he said, "Hey, let's go ahead and set up a server," I was just like, "Well, why would I want to do that? Why do I need to have my own server?" Well, first things first, I mean, we've all heard the expression, a cloud is just someone else's server. And that's exactly correct. When you aren't running the hardware, you don't have physical access to the hardware. It's not yours. And that's for pretty much everything that's operating out in the world today. Is that I mean, we've seen things where people have turned around and it's like, hey, they're such and such a company is going to go ahead and take down this other company and deny them access to their data centers because they don't like what they're doing or whatever. And same thing. It's like if you don't have your own stuff, then you can't really put some of the things you want on it. But the other thing is that you then own the storage. You have a place to put the things that you really care about, the data that you really care about. These different projects. We just watched Nick go ahead and show us a lot about Java. Well, you could go ahead and you can run some of your own test servers if you want to really see what it's running like. Sure, you can run it off of your own box, but let's say you want to run it a little bit longer term, you have a place to do that. But the thing that I have found the best about running my own servers is the experience. First of all, if you ever wanted to do this project, now's the time to do it because there are some amazing tools out there. I simply can't stress enough the type of tools that they have out there. I right now have this logo out here, Netbox, and Netbox is an IP address management and data center infrastructure management piece of software. It was developed by DigitalOcean, by their network team. And this thing runs their data centers. That's what they use it for, but they moved it into the open source space. You could get it right now on GitHub. Joe Dunko just did a presentation, showed you how to set up a GitHub and stuff like that, or asked you to set up a GitHub. You can go right there. You can get Netbox. This is used to run data centers. It is in the enterprise environment. I've actually heard people go ahead and say, why don't you run this? Why don't you run that?" And they're dumping hundreds of dollars or more into software to run on their servers because that's what they think they need to run to have valid experience, and that's simply not the case at all. You could go ahead and run something like Netbox. It's free. It's open source. Pop it on there, and then go ahead and use it, and then when you turn around and let's say you do want to get a job in a data center, they would be like, "What do you know about IPAM tools?" It's like, well, not only do I know about them, I set this one up and this is what I run, and I have spooled up the server, I configured it, and I operate it. The other one is Ansible, and if there might be a couple of you that know about this, but if you don't know, it is the a very popular enterprise tool that is utilized in um, all sorts of IT automation. That's exactly what this is developed by Red Hat, and that's exactly what it's used for. So what you can do is this allows you to go ahead and automate so many different tasks that you would normally have to do by hand. Instead, you write something called a playbook in a markdown language called a YAML, which stands for literally yet another markdown language. And it is as near to spoken English as you can get, and that's what you do. You write a playbook and you can figure out, this is, this is the configuration I want, these are the things that I want on it. When it comes down to spooling up a server or spooling up uh, another piece of software, you can go ahead and instead you can automate some of that process. Let's say you have to do it multiple times, you could go ahead and just run the correct playbook and it does it for you. And these are open source pieces of software that anyone can get a hold of for free and run. This gives you experience, and that is the coolest thing that I've gotten out of my project and running my own servers is this experience. Um, another few other places where you get experience is Linux. I know that you've probably heard, the one guy who comes into class with Arch Linux running on their laptop, and you're like, oh gosh, another one of those guys. Well, Linux actually is right now. They have this massive gulf in the technology industry of people that they need to run, who know and have real time experience running Linux, and people who say that they have experience running Linux. The people that they're getting, they go ahead and they partition a hard drive on their desktop and then they install Ubuntu desktop, and that's all of their experience, and they say have Linux experience. That's not what they're looking for. They're looking for people like when I was going a couple of years ago when I was looking for work and I put down Linux experience, they really interviewed me on that. And I said, "Oh yeah, well I've been running it for more than 15 years. I've spooled up servers. I've done all of this configuration. I know this environment, and it's my favorite. It's actually my favorite desktop environment too. Sure, yes, I run Windows because I've been in a Final Fantasy 14 kick lately, but but anyway, so some people go ahead and yes, they do that, but still, you have this environment that they do need people to run this, and the number of people who are able to do it are very, very small. Um, yeah, go ahead, man. Sorry, Ralph wants to go ahead and cut in for a little bit here.
Um,
I think you just muted yourself.
oh, how about now? There we
Yep,
go.
gotcha.
Um, so what Nick's talking about with this Linux experience, right? I just graduated YSU, and I do a lot of stuff with servers, just as a hobby, right? I've been running services since I was like 14, right? Started off hosting, and now I have my own, and all the stuff that I have done honestly like contributed more towards the job I got right out of YSU. Like literally commencement was Saturday. I started my first day the following Monday. So I have a full-time job. I'm a system administrator down in Struthers, and most of what set me apart from everybody else that applied, and some of these guys are seasoned IT people, um, was specifically because I was running my own stuff. I had experience with a lot of this open source software that, ironically enough, the company happened to use. But he even told me if you hadn't done all this stuff as a hobby, you wouldn't have been considered as highly as you did, and it got me
The
the job. I mean, it
Yeah,
really does make a difference.
getting your degree at YSU is one thing, but actually having experience to back up what you've done, it sets you apart from everybody else. It's incredible. And the other thing that is some more experience that you end up garnering is another thing is databases. It's one thing to know what a database is. It's a whole other thing to be able to go ahead, install it, configure it, and set it up. Netbox runs on PostgreSQL. You have to go ahead. You have to not only install Netbox, but you have to have a PostgreSQL server running somewhere. Probably, most likely, if you're me, you're probably just going to run it in the same Linux instance, and then you have to go ahead and configure it so that way Netbox can actually talk to that database and then use it. And that's experience that you can have. And networking, that's another thing. Networking and DNS tables. What I have to say is that one of the things you learn from networking and DNS tables by getting this experience is that there are things that you can do, and then there are things that you should do. And I actually see Vash here. Yeah, I see him in the. He's my partner in crime. He and I both run these servers. His name is Wesley Urban, and it's one of the things we both see is quite often. It's like we could do it this way, but then this is the proper way to do it. This is the way that's going to scale. This is the way that's actually going to mean get us long-term benefits. Server uptime. I tell you what, it is one heck of a game trying to go ahead and set yourself up into such a way where the amount of server uptime you have can actually beat out some of the places you're going to end up working. And in some cases, you can do it. I was a system administrator for a company in downtown Youngstown, and they used to have a firewall that had an uptime. Its average uptime was 1 week, and that would mean that I have to call up the data center and ask them to reset the firewall. It was awful. And yet I could go ahead and I could spool up stuff on my own server rack and be like, dude, this thing has an uptime of like 285 days. That's a huge difference. Also, organization and documentation. Being able to practice how to organize your builds, how to organize your software, your passwords, all this other stuff. These are all things that garner some amazing experience that you're able to go ahead and you're able to tell someone in an enterprise environment. Let's go. Also, but the first thing you start thinking about is the cost. It is so much less than you think. I think that was the thing that really got us going. Buddy Wesley's like, "Hey Nick, so I saw this guy on YouTube and he had these racks of servers behind him, and I thought, man, those must be tens of thousands of dollars a piece." No, you can get a server like we have one server. It's a PowerEdge 1950. We got it off of eBay for 180 bucks, and we have a router that's running OpenSense as the firewall software. That thing is far more powerful than any prosumer's grade hardware. And $230 for this Asus router. I just found this one on Amazon. 230 bucks. I've seen wireless routers for as much as 400, and I bet you all the money you want that my PowerEdge could go ahead and kick his butt. And I'm actually going to show you some stats later of what that looks like. And so I paid a whole lot less money for a really cool enterprise grade experience out of this stuff. This is where we really started. Now, this isn't actually the laptop I was using at all. This is not the laptop I was using, but I went ahead and I looked up the closest that I could get offline. This is where I absolutely started. Went ahead and I had this old laptop that I had gotten from someone. I had helped them find a new one. So they purchased one. They said, "Hey, would you like my old laptop?" Said, "Sure, I could probably do something with it." And it sat around for a while, but that became my first server. I installed Ubuntu server on it, and it ran it fine. And we just played around. We were able to go ahead and just talk to it using SSH. That was pretty cool practice. We were able to get some little things running on it that were, it was mostly text based. We could absolutely run a website off of it if we wanted to. It was absolutely worth it getting started. But that started to get your toe in the water. And if you have like an old desktop you don't know what to do with, fire it up. Go ahead and that was another thing. I ended up getting a desktop but it was running, I think, a Pentium processor. So it was really, really, really efficient at turning electricity into heat and not a whole hell of a lot else. So um that's one of the things you could do is just if you got something, go ahead, install like Ubuntu server. That's great. That's absolutely fine to get started. But this is my setup now. This is my more recent picture, but right now you're actually seeing this thing before we completely re-rack and redo a lot of the stuff because we're looking at scaling projects and we're like, hey, we could do better now. We know more. This is what we want to do. So first thing I have is that PowerEdge 1950. It's running two Xeon CPUs, um, 5140s, and they're running at 2.33 gigahertz. One of the things you're going to realize is that server processors are not gaming processors. So your gaming processor, sure, you might be able to get 4 gigahertz out of it. That's not what a server is for. A server is for serving data. That's what it does. So what you're going to see out of a server, it's going to be more reliability, and they want to run that server as often as long as possible. One of the things you end up realizing when running servers, they don't like being shut down, which is why down here you see my UPS, and actually that UPS is perfect for running this stuff. It's I could tell you a little bit more about picking out UPSs and stuff like that, but um, this one is running my PowerEdge is running those two processors, and it's running 8 gigs of RAM. So when I go ahead and I do my when I do my power test, when I do my uplink tests and stuff like that, I go ahead and it pegs right at the top of my range almost immediately, just beelines right to the top of my range and just keeps going. So I don't get that really slow start up to the top of the range and stuff. No, it goes right up to the upper range and keeps going. I don't throw enough at this router, less than $200, and I don't throw enough at this router to slow it down. I haven't. I never have. We have one Dell Power Connect switch. It's a 48 port fully managed gigabit switch. It's actually in the back of the rack right now. We're about to replace it down here with this new Juniper. Got a hold of a Juniper EX4200 series switch. And this is what's really cool is not only does this have redundant power supplies, which is what you want for uptime, but also each and every one of these ports, it's power over Ethernet. So I got like 950 watts of power over Ethernet. So if I want to go ahead and run cameras throughout my house, anything I want to do, I can go ahead and run power right over that Ethernet port, and I could shut each and every one of these ports off or on individually. So it's a pretty cool. It's a pretty cool switch. I'm looking forward to putting it in, and that's the reason why it's racked in such a weird way, because we're just getting it up and running and ready to go. But what we have here are two Dell PowerEdge R710s. Each one of them are running two Intel Xeon CPU 5520s and 48 gigabytes of RAM. We could certainly upgrade the RAM and put about 120 in. And what you basically are looking at, that's 24 gigs per processor. So I could go ahead and put in as much as like I think 64 per processor in these. There are servers now, if you went brand new, you're talking about just hundreds and hundreds of gigabytes. I don't even know. It depends on where you look. But they have some beasts now. But the top one is a hypervisor. I'll get into that a little bit, and the other one is a NAS SAN system. So as you could see, went from this to this, and it wasn't fast. And we started small, and then went into something just by gradual purchasing some parts, getting some stuff off of eBay, finding great deals, and then I even got the rack off of eBay. It's just a bolt together thing, and it's been perfect. It's done some great work for us. Oh wow, it cut off a little bit here. That's kind of weird. What to run? First step, I would probably say a hypervisor. I actually just talked to someone right now today about their first server because they were going to go ahead and drop hundreds, even thousands of dollars onto some new computer parts. It's like I need to run all of these. I need to run all of these virtual machines and everything like that. No, you don't. You don't need to run those on your desktop. Outsource. Put it on a server. And when I told them what they were looking at for a server, I think I priced them about $680, and that was two hexa-core processors, 64 gigs of RAM. After a RAID 5 array, their hard drive space would turn out to like 1.2 terabytes. Yeah, it wasn't a it was a fraction of what he was looking at trying to go ahead and run all of those virtual machines on desktop. And with a hypervisor, you can most certainly run some good small virtual machines, run full desktop environments, things like that, and you're not bogging down your computer. And you're going to find that just the performance difference is is amazing because you're not taking resources away from your desktop. Currently, I like what I put here. Why just one run server when you can run many? Uh, right now I'm running Citrix Zen, and the reason why we picked this one over something like VMware is because it's free license. And yes, they do have a lot of these guys do have unlicensed versions, and all it means is you get the same software with less features. All right, so there are a lot of features that are basically just locked down for you. Citrix Zen, their free version, their home version had more features out of the gate to run things on. We're going to be switching to Proxmox. Proxmox is a great hypervisor software, and the reason why we want this is because it's instead of having a free version and then like an enterprise version, what they do is like you can run Proxmox, but you don't get any of our support. You're on your own. We got documentation, everything. Good luck. But that's fine. If you go ahead and build up that build up that experience, stuff like that, then you turn to Proxmox. Whoops, sorry about that. And we get a lot more features without having to pay licensing fees. And because I'm running almost all Linux containers, um, I mean, I'm running all Linux VMs. And what I could do is I can now go ahead and put those together in more density because Proxmox runs Linux. I have the option of running them as containers instead of full virtual machines, which just makes it a lot more lightweight. And it's perfect for when you're just running a website, little tools, stuff like that. You don't need full VMs using up a lot of resources. You could go ahead and compress it all down. It just makes it a lot more dense. So we're going to increase our density with some Proxmox. But here's some possibilities. And yes, you probably see a lot of logos. Don't worry, I did go ahead and check to make sure that I can use these in my presentation. I'm using them correctly. But first thing, one of my favorite things right now is Nexcloud. If you guys have never heard about it, Nexcloud is a fully featured cloud solution with more extensions than you will ever know what to do with. You have email, obviously file storage and access, media server, calendar, contacts, much more. It also has phone applications and extensions for your web browser. And uh, some of you probably know about what happened with LastPass. Well, guess what? I didn't feel anything because I'd already moved my password management to a password managing system on Nextcloud, and it is fully featured. It's kind of like I'm running LastPass, but I own it, and the data's all mine. It's on my servers. And when I say much more, I mean it. I mean, this thing, you could go ahead and have a public facing schedule. So you could schedule things. You have put CRM in here. You can run whole businesses off of Nextcloud, and whole businesses do. If you go to their website and you see how many businesses go ahead and run their cloud solutions and stuff like that off of an enterprise Nextcloud, they're big names, and you can have it for free and just run it on your own servers. And this is my favorite thing. I don't do anything with Google Cloud or Amazon Cloud or nothing. I don't do Apple Cloud, nothing. I run off my Nextcloud, and I am so happy with it. It is so cool. The other thing I love is GOGS. We have a full Git repository on there, and if you guys have ever heard of GitLab, well, when we tried to set up GitLab, it was the biggest nightmare. We never got it to run. And I know there are some people that have. Good luck, because when Vash found GOGS, when Wesley found GOGS, I fell in love with it because this is fully written in Go, and it is like I said, simply could not be easier to set up, and it is full featured. And this thing is tiny. When we had to go ahead and back up, when we had to go ahead and back it up for a migration and stuff like that, I think with our code and GOGS was like 150 megabytes. That was it. It was so tiny, takes up hardly any space, and it is full featured. You have the SSH. You can push your stuff to it with SSH. You can write a full wiki for your code. You have a profile. You have all of those features that you would expect out of like GitLab or GitHub. You got it in GOGS. One of the things I told you is that we have a NAS in there, and that's true NAS. It was formerly called FreeNAS. It is very much a near prosumer grade NAS system. I can't think of anything that I need that TrueNAS doesn't provide out of a NAS system. In fact, I'm still finding features on there that I'm like, wow, I honestly could run a full business off of this thing. And it could definitely manage a ridiculous large amount of data. If any of you are familiar with ZFS, that's its main file system. ZFS is literally called the zettabyte file system. And if you don't know how big that is, look it up. Uh, a zettabyte is massive, and it can handle each file size that it can handle is something like 15 exabytes. Again, look it up. We're talking about huge amounts of data, but the thing that it gets out of it is that TrueNAS's ZFS file system, and actually the ZFS file system in general, has native RAID right out of the file system, not out of a card, not out of the software, out of the file system. So you can go ahead and manage all of your data in pools that you set up. It's just absolutely amazing, and TrueNAS comes with it right out of the box, and it's free. It's open source. You don't have to pay for it. Some other things to consider when you're running these servers, one of the things that I've been into lately is seeing what I can do to actually earn some money. There are some more and more possibilities every single day when it comes down to um what you could do with your servers, but earning money off of it. Let's say you set up that Nexcloud system and you have it running on a NAS, and you're like, man, I loaded this with like 24 terabytes of hard drives, and you just went nuts. Well, maybe you got friends that are just like, man, I'm so sick of Google and blah blah blah. Dude, I run a cloud. Do you want to go and store with me? Another you could do that if you wanted to. One of the things I've been looking at are running a node for some projects I've been really into. I've been following blockchain for, I want to say almost a decade now. Um, and now they just have the projects that they have out there are cool. Pre-search is a fully decentralized search engine that actually pays you for your searches, and they pay you in pre tokens. And I have been using it, and I absolutely love it. But the to run a node really isn't that hard, and that means you're contributing to the project. You're giving them resources that they can use to validate on the whole network. I mean, it's decentralized, so they need space. They need people who are willing to do that, and you can actually generate pre-tokens by staking a pre-search node. Um, Another thing you can do, Arweave is another project I've been really interested in because they are looking to be basically the decentralized version of like Google Cloud or AWS. That's what they want to do. And the way that they have their um, blockchain and their whole network set up is that they don't want you neither one of these guys wants you running these bunch of graphics cards, huge banks of graphics cards. That's not what they need. They're actually built in such a way where that's not actually going to be efficient or effective. With Arweave, the way that they pay you is a good balance with your internet connection and your processing power and your storage space. So let's say you went and got that extra this server and you put it in your rack. You could set that up as an Arweave node, and then you're contributing towards that project. Last thing is running game servers. Obviously, this is probably one of the first things most people thought of when they thought of running their own servers is running a game server. Well, it is available to go ahead and monetize certain game servers. And there are entire articles written about it. The possibilities are really endless. So you can even think even further outside of just, you know, these are the projects I want to run. That's cool. Get started there. But then what can that turn into for you? So, you know, after this, I mean, hopefully you're thinking just what will you do? What type of projects do you want to run? What type of software excites you? Not for very little money you could turn around and you can get started with just a little extra computer that you have laying in a closet. 5, 6, 7 years from now, who knows what it'll be turned into. So I did want to go ahead and open this up for any questions because this is more of a presentation of a project more than walking you through some code. So does anyone have any questions about that?
Yeah, I've got one question here.
Yeah.
Um, when you were saying that you were using like a Pentium 2 as your first server, is that what
Well,
you were saying, correct?
oh, penny. Well, I think it was a Pentium 4, but yeah, I was using a little desktop with a Pentium processor in it.
So, what makes it fundamentally different having a server OS as opposed to like a normal OS? Like if I'm having troubles running Windows whatever 8.1 or Windows Vista, am I still like in the market for turning that PC into a server, or is the spec just too
Uh
low?
okay. Well, that is actually what we could do. That's actually a fantastic question because you have to understand when it comes down to the way that Microsoft thinks about servers and the way that, well, pretty much everyone else thinks about servers. Microsoft's servers are still very much a it's still very much like a desktop operating system with some other features mixed in, some other tools mixed in. Okay. So you're not going to see very much out of that. What I was doing is I was running Linux servers, and almost all Linux servers, unless you go ahead and you know change this, it's not going to have any graphical user interface or anything. Everything is going to be command line, which is perfectly fine because what that means is you're not spending the resources. So when I went ahead, if I go ahead and take a computer with those types of resources, like a little Pentium 4, maybe 2 gigs of RAM or something like that, it's going to run. It's just because of the fact that it's not going to have the resource demands of a full desktop operating system. It's simply going to run that, and things are going to run a bit faster because it's simply not having those resources taken from it. But that's the difference between, like, let's say a Linux server and a Windows server. If you run like Windows 2016 or Windows 29, Windows Server 2016 or Windows Server 2019, when you turn that thing on and you fire up your screen, it's gonna look a lot like a Windows desktop because it's kind of what it is. But it has the tools to run certain server features. But with Linux, you get Ubuntu server. It is not Ubuntu desktop. It is just not running the same type of software on it because the server, you want to have all of those resources for whatever tools you're going to run.
So it really is just like the overhead of running a desktop environment that bogs down these older chips. That if
Oh
you're
yeah,
running like Ubuntu server, it's just not making those demands of your chips. So it has
yeah,
time to do the actual stuff.
yes, yes. Actually, there was one time I got a hold of of this netbook, and its original operating system I think was like Windows 8 or something like that. It was pretty bad. But one time I was just like, I don't really need all of this stuff, so I literally installed Ubuntu server on it. And, and so basically it was a laptop that was just a terminal. It had no other purpose. So it was a little bit, and it ran it great. I mean, I was running a whole lot faster than any full featured desktop that I was putting on it. But yeah.
We've got a question in the chat. Would you ever start a YouTube channel talking about computer hardware and servers?
You know what? Honestly, I could refer you to a couple of great people. Myself, probably not, because running YouTube videos is a lot more that's a lot more on my time than I'm willing to do. But there are some great people, like there's Luke Smith is a good guy. There's Craft something. Hey Wesley, are you here? Are you hearing this?
It's craft computing. I know exactly what
Craft
you're talking
computing,
about.
yeah, that's it. I was gonna ask him. He keeps on kicking me videos from that, but yeah, craft computing is a good one. He has a rack of servers. I've watched some of his stuff. Um, Brody Robertson. Those are all great people. You could go out and watch their stuff. I like each one of those guys because they go ahead and they each have their own take on what they like out of a Linux system, on what they like out of their servers, out of their network, and so that's what I would probably end up doing. But myself, no, I don't have that type of time. Anybody else?
I've set up GitLab myself before, and I know that pain.
Oh yeah, yeah. GitLab, and GitLab was only one of the very very painful things that I tried. The other one was it was like this Apache product. Um, I think it was an enterprise management software or something like that. That I was trying to set up for someone. I was just looking it over. I could not get it to run. There were too many steps to just get it up and going, and I'm like, why? Why does it have to be that hard and difficult
Yeah,
to
I'm pretty
get
sure
the software
GitLab.
up?
I can't remember if I actually succeeded in setting it up twice or if it was the second attempt that actually worked. But
Oh,
there's like at least four pieces to that thing, and if one of them ever goes down, forget it. You might as well just.
yeah. I would definitely recommend GOGS because of that. It's so small, it's so lightweight, but it simply does not lack features at all. Every time I go to it and every time I'm inside of it, I'm finding something new. And
Yeah,
it just
I'm
has
gonna
all
have
of
to
those new
look into
features.
that because I'm
Yeah.
rebuilding my infrastructure now. I backed up the VM that had GitLab, but I haven't even bothered to start it back up on the new hardware yet.
Yeah, because you're just like, I don't want to spend 3 hours rebuilding this or 4 hours or however long it's gonna take. I simply don't have enough beer in the house. Um,
You know, I'll do all the other terrible things, run my own DNS server, run my own mail server, but GitLab's a whole nother monster.
actually, an email server is a possibility that we've been talking about. Like I said, in May we're going to be re-racking, and that means we're switching out for Proxmox, and we're going to redo um how we put things together, like how we're placing things, the demand for the hypervisor on the NAS, that type of stuff. But one of the things we want to do, we do want to try to we've run over a couple of different projects, and we're going to give that one a go. But that's after we set up everything else and get everything else up and running again. So, yeah.
Yep.
We've got another question in the chat. Do you feel the US should have more data equity laws, or is it better for the common user to quote unquote own their data themselves?
Um, I think every time you have to ask whether or not the government should be involved, you have to think about what you're not doing to own it. I am not a person to Um, I'm simply not a person to say the government needs to do this, that, or the other thing at all, because then what am I doing to, what am I not doing to own my stuff, to to take control of what I have? And honestly, the weird thing is that we kind of already have laws in place. If it's your data, you own that data. That's it. But the thing is that we tend to have a lot of people who are like, oh, but this caveat or that caveat. No, it's my data. But that's the problem. If you're putting it in a private company's data center, it's on their equipment, and they could do a lot of stuff, and that's it. But there are a lot of companies, the servers that I showed you here, they actually were available from, there are companies out there that literally get paid to clear data centers out during upgrades and stuff like that. I mean, data centers are emptying out their servers. They're upgrading at least every 5 years. So they're pulling these servers out. Well, these companies will turn around and refurbish them and resell them for a smallest fraction of the cost. And a 5-year-old server is absolutely perfect for the average person. In fact, you're simply not going to run out of stuff. These things are probably 5-year-old when we got them. When I looked at the paperwork, they were audited in 2017, and I'm still running them, and I have no plans on upgrading yet because they just run. They will go. They're not something that you're going to be really bogging down anytime soon. You're not a data center. So you can own your data, and the tools are out there for you to do it. I would definitely say, before going ahead and petitioning your government, ask what you can do for yourself, and even helping other people.
We've got a question from Squig Squag, but he wants to speak it. So go ahead.
So the company I work for has a lot of clients that do voice over IP, and we're looking at moving to the cloud for those, just because we're sick and tired of having physical voice over IP servers. That I can't think of it off the top of my head. The cloud service you mentioned, would
Okay.
they allow, like, if we set up a voice server for them, would they allow or have the feature to allow the client to have like their own version of a sign-in to access it, or would that be something we would have to do ourselves if we set it up?
Aha. Yeah, wow, that's a really good and very convoluted question.
Sorry,
Because
yeah.
no, it really depends on who you go to. I think there are possibilities, like with any experience that I've had with AWS, which is, I will be the first to admit, it isn't massive. Because I haven't really had to go to that. But from what I understand, you can set up group policies for clients.
Okay.
So, like, well, you could set up group policies in general. So you can go ahead and put in username and password, and then say, this person's an admin level person. And that's what I had to do when I set up an AWS account. I was playing around, experiment with it. I was an admin level user, but I could go ahead and add separate users in there, and I could go ahead and I had very fine granular control of what they're allowed to do and what they're not allowed to do. But the thing is, I guess I would need a bit more context. There might be another way to do what you're trying to do.
Okay.
But honestly, I would need a little bit more context to make a proper decision on what that would be.
Gotcha.
Just because, are you trying to, you're just using it to set up separate voice servers or separate users on that server, or what? Or I'm kind of
We would be setting up multiple servers within
okay.
our own admin account, and then
Okay.
for each of those servers, we would want to have their own client at
Okay.
access.
Okay. Oh, okay, that makes sense. I don't see why you wouldn't have that, just because, like I said, there's such granular control when you come down to cloud services.
Okay.
Yeah. So you should be able to go ahead and say you have only access to this, and then that's all they get to do.
We've got another question. Let's
Mhm.
pretend I am starting my new web app. Should I start off hosting with AWS or should I try to build a server on my own? Joe Dunko says neither, use Heroku.
Joe, you love that Heroku. Honestly, what Joe told you is not bad advice either. So it really depends. But I would, if it was just that web service, I probably would just go with Joe's idea, because Heroku has I'm not certain of all of the levels that they have available, but when you're coming down with either setting up your own server or setting up an AWS, it's almost going to be just as difficult with each one, because what you have to do is you don't just need to have the server there, then you have to spool up a server on it. Then you have to go ahead and set up either Nginx or Apache. Then you get to go ahead and set up your web app. When Heroku, you just go right into setting up the web app. So um, when it comes to something like having your own server, when you're that's the reason why it's so good to start so small, like just spare hardware lying around the house and you install Ubuntu server on it or something, is because then you start thinking of the possibilities that you have. And if it's just to run that web app, then I would probably go towards a cloud service if you're never going to go ahead and touch the server again. But this turned into a massive project, and we kept on thinking of really, really cool stuff we wanted to play with. So, instead of, some people, for a lot of people, it turns into like, hey, instead of collecting baseball cards or bottle caps, I set up servers. So, but for that sort of stuff, if you can't, if the opportunity presents itself to go ahead and set up your own server, go ahead and do it if that's what you want to take on. But if you just need to get that web app up and running, go to something like Heroku, so that way you could go ahead and just get it running and get it there. But if you see long-term benefits out of, I'd really like to be able to go ahead and do something similar, but I'd like to own it. If that is what makes, if that's what you like the most, if that's something you really want to do, if you see some good long-term benefits out of that, especially when it comes down to experience of being able to set up different environments, I would definitely say set up your own server.